Books. They are a New York-based independent company dedicated to publishing literary fiction and creative nonfiction. They were founded in July 2017 as an imprint of the Adelaide literary magazine with the aim to facilitate publishing of novels, memoirs, collections of short stories, poems, and essays by contributing authors of magazine and other qualified writers. Our first writer of the segment will be David Dephy, a Georgian American poet, and I am going to just read a short excerpt from the award-winning American writer and journalist D.W. Gibson. And he's talking about his new book, A Double Meaning. These poems are filled with life, not just any life, but deeply energetic, optimistic, and determined energy. Reading through these pages has been the most vivifying experience I've had in a long time. Please welcome to the stage, David Dephy.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, hi. My name is David Dephy. I'm a Georgian American, and two of my books have been published by Adelaide Books in 2020 and now 2022. I will read a couple of poems from my Ukrainian saga, and then I'll introduce two of our authors. One of them is Mr. René Galván, and he wrote and published this amazing book. It's called The Shadow of Time, right here. Then we have a guest from Israel. Her name is Lali Michaeli, and she also has been published by Adelaide Books. Here is her work. It's called, the first one, The Madhouse, right here. And another one called Papa, right here. And myself, David Dephy. This is my first book written directly in English language. And by the way, I started writing in English when I started thinking in English. That's the deal. To switch the languages, it's not easy, but it feels very bizarre, but it's beautiful anyway. So it's called Eastern Star, and this is my cover art. I'm a painter as well. And the other book with Joshua Cohen, it's called Double Meaning. Now I'm going to read a couple of works. But first of all, I'd like to say, glory to Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. Listen, friend, I want to tell you a story. You saw the fighter jets when Russia was bombing Georgia in 2008. Again. You saw the falling bombs all around us. You saw death, earth. You saw dead heaven and dead Georgians. And now, Ukraine in 2022 again. Living the sun behind us and its golden shadows all around the fields. Watching the clouds as they pass us by. Touching your heartbeat with your breath, we feel our perfect home. Perfect is being free. In sound of evil, as we flee between the explosions at dawn, our wishes carve over us like a wave. Our hearts beat through the mysteries of victory. Our blood shines through the nights. That's how heaven sees us in the dark, constellated by the dew of children's spirit. We're not lost in the noise, spinning chaos into order, creating birth from death, and looking for an exit, trying to carry your smile. And that lost heartbeat of ourselves in this great affliction of our time called freedom. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you. 90-year-old man. I was standing alone in front of the stillness of March, not expecting the flow of memories. We're living without love. That's why the war cannot be measured by history, by ashes, by art. Without today, we breathe between yesterday and tomorrow. Do you know something about time? About time, yes. And it's insanity. Do you know something about yourself? About me? How I lived? How I loved? What I did? Maybe you can predict future. Time should have some meaning for you. For me, it's an insanity. I felt history's neurasthenia in that very afternoon when I was standing in front of the stillness of March and not expecting the flow of seconds, nerves of time. I understood, and I did not expect to be alive. Time is a meaningless, and it's suppressing us. I didn't expect to feel that deadly second again in emptiness, but my heart was able to beat again. My heart is remembering, after centuries, how to beat again in the frozen silence of fears, war, in the raw, cold breeze of the laughs and whole. 96-year-old man, Mr. Romanchenko, survived the concentration camps, Buchenwald, Peenemünde, Mittelbau-Dora, Bergen-Belsen. Yesterday he was killed by the Russian missile hitting his apartment building in Kharkiv. Russia, the denazifier, did what the Nazis could not do. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Divine Ukraine. Your eyes are the eyes of God. Your breath is mother tongue of earth. Your blood is a symphony of fire. Your lips are the truth tellers. No one can tell your golden mystery. No one can feel you without admiration. Your heart is a garden of kisses. Your ears are pearls of expectations. Your words are constellations, the faces of heroes encircled by race, drifted on the minds of the world. Their smile, their look, their strength, and its innocence, a tide that tugs at us. In times like these, sense washes over us, and we gather together in the deadly noise of millennium, and this stillness, a stillness that never wavers. All we have become, divine Ukraine, is what your innocence has made of us. The naked homelet of freedom beats right in your heart. Thank you. Glory to heroes. Take your sandals off your feet. You are in Ukraine. Take your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. And the air you are breathing is holy, touching grace on your face, drifting through the noise of madness. From the other side of the dark, still the lips touch the air, and this body is a foreign language addressing the foreign world and its foreign skies. I say, take a deep breath, my love. Let us embrace this great void as an old friend. Perhaps then we shall discover each other far on the other side of alone. Have you heard this song? A song of braves. Take your sandals off your feet. The place where you are standing is holy. Every grain is the heart of a child, the grain of truth, breathing through the golden shadows. Have you heard the laughs and smells? Yeah, this is the greatest afternoon of freedom. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine and stop Russia. Now, let me introduce Mr. Robert. You'll be amazed, and you can buy our books right there. Robert, please welcome Mr. Robert René Galván.
The motto written outside the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania reads, "Kill the Indian, save the man." This poem is called "The Education of Astain Tohahali." He arrived in 1892 in full regalia, a magnificent mane, hoop earrings, and a massive necklace, shoulders draped with a Navajo blanket, a face like a bronze god's. It took 4 years to domesticate the savage, and he left the school as Tom Turlino. Shorn, dressed like a dandy, in a cravat and coat, the white man's words on his tongues, back to Coyote Canyon, where he rubbed desert sand over his flesh to purge the stench of captivity, resumed his duties as medicine man. So earlier I was asked about my name, Robert René Galván. Well, Robert, of course, American name, and then René is a French name, which all my siblings have, and Galván is actually a Moroccan name, but I am half indigenous and mostly half Moroccan. And so this book examines my heritage and also racism in the United States. But not all the poems are about that. This one is the color of the soul, stemming from these weekly catechisms we were forced to endure as children. The color of the soul. What is the color of the soul? Ineffable waft sealed into flesh by a dervish of sand. Is it truly the white milk of God's grace, progressing to black with each transgression? or rather like the radiance of the symbiont orchid, its tendrils clasping the body for passage? Or is it an aura, the nebula hosted by the wary chameleon, or perhaps like the invisible residue of a plucked string, a migrant tone in the darkness? And from my other book, Standing Stones, this is entitled Dominion, and it was featured at a festival in London. And actually, they paid 2 actors to recite this poem, and one recorded it for a CD, and one did it in the performance in London. And I hope I can read as well as the actor did. Dominion. Who can say how the weaver bird builds his mansion from 1,000 blades of grass? The warp and weft of his ebony beak for the prospect of love, or how the foal unfolds from her wet heap and trembles to her feet, ready to take her place in the field of thistles and wild yarrow, or how the tadpole evades the mandibles of the dragonfly larva, unaware that he will soon become a frog and exact revenge with his darting tongue, or how the lumbering leatherback, an angel in the water, returns to the same sand to bury her clutch year after year, or how the egret knows when the feast will hatch on the shore, or how the hornet's silo emerges from saliva and pulp and from a paraganglia, and likewise the host of butterflies navigate the continent from the bundle in the thorax, and how our own pale progeny arrive writhing and helpless to assume dominion. And this one just came out, this journal, yes? Oh, yes? I'm a trained opera singer, actually, so that's kind of funny that I need the mic, right? You know. So, Humana Oscura is magazine issue 5 just came out, and they featured mine as the first poem in this lovely journal. And it was inspired by a magnolia tree in my in-laws' yard. Magnolia. Long before the bee, the stewardship of beetles, drawn by the seductive scent of sepals, like a wind-born song, that the bulbous fruit wept red tears into the future, to the gardens of Asia, the Roman summit, and the temperate streets of the New World. We know it was here eons ago, its impression left in frozen clay and in topaz resins. A young woman uproots a sapling, binds its feet, carries it to a cottage by the sea because she could not bear to leave it behind, chanced its survival in the sandy soil. Now it sprawls above the house where she tends a garden. Its blossoms greet the same sun. Lavender jewels will come and go, even after we are gone. Now for my book from Adelaide, The Shadow of Time, and let me find Le Bleu. Here it is. Le Bleu is the blue hour, and it's subtitled The Time of Evening because for the French, Le Bleu is the gloaming. And I have an epigraph by Jacques Guilin, who was a perfumer at the turn of the last century, and he says this: "The sun has set, but night has not yet fallen. It's the suspended hour, the hour when one finally finds oneself in renewed harmony with the world and the light. The night has not yet found its star." Le Bleu. As the world folds into shadow, a gray tapestry descends. The coyotes lament from the wild place across the creek, and the fading chorale of the late train awaken crepuscular birds who inhabit the rift like rare gods. Abuelo sits in the cleft of a mesquite, his rolled tobacco flickering with the fireflies as a dim lantern receives the adoration of moths. A cat's eyes glow green in the gloaming light, and a cloud of mosquitoes devoured by bats. The outhouse moans open, and the boy treads quietly on the moonlit stepping stones through the corn and calabacitas under the windmill as it measures the October wind. Pupils widen like black holes, ingest the night spirits, and he cannot yet imagine a world beyond these stars, or that he will someday live in a place where it's never dark. And I must say, you see the blood on my finger, as I mentioned these mosquitoes devoured by the bats, I was bitten by a large mosquito. What does that mean? That's a sign, yes. This poem was nominated last year for the Pushcart Award, actually. Let's see. I'll just read a few. I'm going to skip most of my list since we're behind. Let me go to one that has some meaning, contemporary meaning. The sleep of reasons produces monsters. And this is after the Francesco Goya's engraving, El sueño de la razón produce monstruos. And you may recognize that etching where the man is asleep on the desk and all these monsters are flying, bats and creatures around his sleeping head. So the sleep of reason produces monsters. Ignorance awoke in a storm of witless starlings, blackened the sky with dread. Minions led like the bull who follows red to his own demise. Faint assurances, enormous walls cannot quench the plague or the machinations of the slaughterhouse. Caged minions and tent cities in the desert, old resentments channeled into amnesia, diversions, throngs memorized by the looking glass light, walk the street like the undead, while the world bastes in its own detritus. But crisis forces change. A dim lamp glows on the horizon, the turning of night into a sky of blue. And finally, let me just do one more. I've cut the list a bit since we were behind. Awakening, yes. More mosquitoes. Awakening. This was, I read this on NPR last year for National Poetry Month, and they did a lovely production with the soundtrack Under My Voice, which I gave them raw, and I'm very happy they were able to include this in their celebration. Awakening. And then the machine stopped. The sky began to clear when the great gears groaned to a halt. The ground ceased its shivering. Stars appeared and beasts emerged in our absence. Wings cast shadows over empty streets. In the gnawing silence, a distant siren reminds us of a gruesome tally. We peer from our doorways for a ray of hope, long to walk the paths we barely noticed. In the ebb and flow of life and death, we inhabit the low tides, a scant respite from irresistible waves. After a time, we will return to normal, become mired in old assumptions and petty desires to the ways that failed us. But a few will awake to find that the world kept turning and changed. They will walk into the sun and shed their masks. Thanks for your indulgence.
Okay, don't go. Our last reader is from Israel, Tel Aviv. Her name is Lali Michaeli. She wrote The Madhouse right here and The Pop-Up. So please welcome Lali Michaeli.
I have a new book. The name of the book is אהובי הסודי אתה. Thank you to having me. I'm from Israel, I'm from Tel Aviv. Thank you, thank you. And the book is actually about or after a dialogue between me and the Palestinian poet. We never met, but 2 years during the COVID-19, we had discussion and we had a dialogue around the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And from that time, when we started this dialogue, we started also to write poems. He wrote his poems and I wrote my poems, and these are my poems from that dialogue. And it's quite new. I want to read one poem from it. אהובי הסודי אתה, אנרכיסט שמתקן לי את שפתו בשפתי, זה שלא יראה אותי באדמתו, זה שלא אראה אותו באדמתי. אבל הקולות שלנו מרחפים כמו מתחים בעולם. ההיסטוריה שלך נכתבת בדיו שיוצר במפעל האהבה שלי. I'll read this poem in English. My secret lover, you, an anarchist who corrects me, his language into my language. The one who will not see me on his land, the one that I will not see on my land. But our voices are floating like bombardments in the world. Your history is written in ink that was produced in the factory of my love. Next poem, from the book The Mad House, that was published in Adelaide book 2 years ago. בית, כשאין לך ואין לך ואין לך ואתה לא, ויש לך ואתה לא, ואז כל מה שקיים מבחינתך בעולם רק בית. בית. והבית הזה רעוע, והבית הזה לא מכיל, והבית הזה מדמם, והבית הזה מוקיע, ולבית הזה יש דלת, והדלת. אתה צריך להחליט מתי להפסיק לעמוד בכניסה. הדברית לא תתבלבל עוד, לא תניח את המכתבים לצד הדרך. הנה עכשיו יש לי כתובת, והנה עכשיו שמחה. ואני יוצאת ובאה, ויוצאת ובאה, ועל כל ימיי ריקוד. I'll do my best in English. Home. When you don't have, and don't have, and don't have, and you are not, and you have, and you are not, and then from your point of view, everything which exists in the world is just home, and this home is unstable, and this home doesn't contain, and this home is bleeding, and this home is condemning, and you have to decide when to stop standing in the entrance. The post-woman won't be confused anymore, will not put the letters aside. Here I have an address now, and here is happiness now. And I'm coming and going and coming and going, and in all my days, dance. Thank you. The next book that also published in Adelaide is Papa. יתומה, לוקחת מניו יורק ונוחתת. יתומה, לוקחת מטוס מניו יורק ונוחתת למצבי החדש. יתומה. זה כן, בגודל היקום. Orphan. Taking a place from New York and arriving at my new state, an orphan. It is indeed the size of the universe. תנו לי שנייה, אני עוצבת עצב של יתומים, אל תנחמו אותי, זה רק מחמיר אותי. חזרתי לחיי היום-יום, אני לא באמת חיה. פאפה שלי מת. And in English it sounds like this. Give me a second. I sadden the sadness of orphans. Don't console me. It just makes me worse. I returned to daily life. I'm not really alive. My papa is died. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who read with Adelaide Books. It was all very, very great. And that concludes this evening's portion. Thank you all for coming and reading, and we hope to see you tomorrow. We'll be back here for more poetry and fun under the sun. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.